1996, the Spice Girls took over the airwaves with a message of girl power, while Jamaican-Canadian Donovan Bailey became the fastest man alive. Oprah changed the face of publishing with her book club. And the cable guy made Jim Carrey the first actor to be paid $20 million for a role.
I guess the point of the whole thing is that you better get some love, from some other source than the TV, and or else you're going to be a messed up dude.
Hollywood experienced an unprecedented boom in blockbuster filmmaking with massive hits like Independence Day. But rising budgets meant an overcrowded market with just as many flops. Twister, Mission Impossible, and The Rock quenched audiences' thirst for action. But it was small films like Fargo, Bottle Rocket, and Bound that introduced the next generation of directors.
1996 is the year when you're really feeling the Pulp Fiction effect. All of a sudden, indie movies are gaining traction against studio movies.
I think there was a lot of new blood in the mid-1990s in Hollywood. So there was a lot of freshness in the kind of filmmaking and the kind of stars that emerged.
With the rise in blockbusters in the 90s, you saw people turning back to old genres, including the 70s disaster movie. But this time, it was all about aliens invading.
Independence Day is kind of the leader of the disaster movie renaissance. It has some of the most memorable images of its time. The White House blowing up is impossible to forget.
This movie chooses to destroy the Empire State Building. It chooses to destroy the Statue of Liberty. It chooses to destroy things that, as North Americans, we view as evoking humanity.
When that spaceship burns its way into the Manhattan skyline, that image is seared in my head. Roland Emmerich, one of the hackiest filmmakers ever, but man, does he know how to put on a spectacle.
They're almost a War of the Worlds-esque virus that has come to destroy us. They can't be reasoned with, they can't be spoken to, they cannot be understood. And that is such a unifying villain. These aliens are attacking our unified home. Let's rally together, let's get in some jet planes, let's take them down.
Will Smith, of course, is an icon for me growing up. And so for him to then break out from Fresh Prince and then movies like Bad Boys, which is totally my jam, but then lead a blockbuster movie, a science fiction spectacle, lead the summer movie, it was unheard of.
It is a bit groundbreaking when you look back on it that it's a black man that's being chosen to save America versus the Tom Cruises of the world. That was previously the person that we kind of visualized as being our savior in these types of disaster moments. He is willing to play funny. He is willing to play a bit soft as well when he needs to.
That's difficult to be able to be funny in that serious a situation. It's a really a fine line before you undercut the seriousness of the film. And that's what my struggle was, to be able to get as close to the edge as I could get and be able to be funny without losing the sincerity of the moment.
He's not leaning back so much either on this idea of being a macho guy. It's almost a signal that the idea of the leading man is about to change.
People love Independence Day, but does Independence Day have aliens dancing with Tom Jones on a stage? It does not. So in that sense, I think Mars Attacks is the superior film.
It's amazing how much Mars Attacks feels like a parody of Independence Day, even though both films were developed simultaneously and came out the same year, so couldn't have known what was happening. It is very much turning on its head the kind of cigar-chomping hero you see in Independence Day.
Mars Attacks is a love letter to this sort of schlock 50s gum crack sci-fi stuff. The flying saucers and the weird vampiric woman. This is Plan 9 from outer space with a budget that is through the roof.
In Mars Attacks, they keep trying to be nice to the aliens, they keep trying to make deals with the aliens, show themselves as human, and that at every turn gets them killed.
Pierce Brosnan says, they're so advanced, they couldn't possibly be violent or barbaric. And when the Martians arrive, they're actually deeply cruel, sadistic. They're actually, I think, very funny in their sadism. They love to set up a kind of mousetrap Rube Goldberg death for people. They decapitate them and put them on dogs just to be mean, just to be spiteful.
It is silly. That's the point. You get to watch silly aliens go rap, 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 and shoot people with destructo rays. And somewhere in the background, you can hear Tim Burton giggling every time because he got away with it. He made the movie of his heart. And it's dopey and square and silly, and Tom Jones flies a plane and Slim Whitman saves the day, and what else do you need?
When it came to crime thrillers in 1996, we got some new protagonists, specifically women. We had Frances McDormand in Fargo, and we also had Gina Gershon and Jennifer Tilly in Bound.
For the Wachowski sisters' first film, we see a lesbian romance, we see a film noir, and it's all so gorgeously shot. This film has two femme fatales, and they have such amazing chemistry. You can see the Wachowskis and their talent right from this first film and how far they would go.
When Bound came out, there was so much focus on the lesbian sex scenes in it, and I feel like not enough people paid enough attention to how great of a thriller it was outside of that.
It's essentially a heist film, a thriller, and the relationship is just as minor as a relationship in any other big movie, in Lethal Weapon or a Die Hard, or not that this is a big movie, but in any other sort of conventional film, it happens to be the relationship.
The sex scenes are kind of stacked into the first half of the film, and then it just kind of gives way to this really effective crime story. And when I first saw it, I was expecting the sex scenes, but I was completely blown away by the direction it took after that. And that's where the real excitement comes in.
The amazing thing about film noirs is that secrets are really the currency of these films and the way information is passed around. And this film is just brilliant at putting characters in these situations where they just have to unpack all these different layers of how did this happen? Why? How can I get myself out of this? How can I screw this person over without screwing myself over? Uh-oh, it's gone too far.
This is just such a stylistically confident film. It just, every shot of it looks extraordinary. There's so much formal control to the aesthetic. Bound is definitely one of those all-time great debuts where the minute you see it, you want to see anything else that these filmmakers make.
Fargo is an absolute masterpiece of crime drama. It's an exploration into the banality of crime.
Fargo is an incredibly funny movie. It's probably considered a comedy, and yet there's not really any jokes in it. What the Coen brothers point out is so funny is this idea of Minnesota nice, this kind of niceness as repression. So you're often seeing scenes that are heated, that are near violence, but just with somebody being so polite and nice, and that's just automatically funny.
The Coens just have such an ear for not just dialogue, but dialect. They understand that because they grew up in these kind of small towns and they knew these people and how those interactions actually play out in real life.
Hey, they said they were going to the Twin Cities.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, is that useful to you?
Oh, you betcha, yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a portrayal of a woman in Minnesota or North Dakota. It was about a woman who was born and raised and chose to live in a small town for the rest of her life. And that I think that there's a very specific mentality of people like that. And you also tend to identify yourself stronger with a regional accent in those cases.
William H. Macy is playing this extremely pathetic character, somebody who is constantly downtrodden, yet you kind of have sympathy at the start. You can understand how this guy wants a little bit of a better life, yet the more he does, the more his kindness and sadness reveals that he is probably the most evil person on screen.
No one ever would expect such a horrible crime to take place, but it does because it has the presence of the Swede, played by the one and only Peter Stormare. He just creates such an incredible sense of malevolence and evil, and that evil is met by probably the most uncomplicated force of good in the film, played by Frances McDormand as Margie Gunderson. She's incredibly intelligent and skillful and a great detective. She just cannot comprehend how someone can be so incredibly unremittingly evil.
I think a lot of us remember Fargo for kind of the absurdist moments, for the Paul Bunyan statue and the ah geez and the bloody tissue on Steve Buscemi's face, but It's actually a really solemn movie about the ways people hurt each other unnecessarily. Frances McDormand has that beautiful speech at the end where she says, "And for what? For a little bit of money." And then she pauses and she says, "And it's a beautiful day." And you really do get that sense of sadness that anybody would be so stupid as to kill each other over something so small.
90s comedy loved a dumb guy trying to succeed, and weirdly you got kind of the high and low in 1996 with Bottle Rocket and Happy Gilmore.
Bottle Rocket is consummately and quintessentially a Wes Anderson movie, while simultaneously not quite being a Wes Anderson movie in the way that we now understand that to be.
What's great about it is that you see all that kind of nascent Wes Anderson-y stuff right here in its infancy. So you see, the use of people looking directly into the camera. You see the perfection of his framing. You see how much he loves horizontal lines.
I think the opening sequence of Bottle Rocket, where we have our lead character leaving a psychiatric hospital, sets up the film really well. He has to pretend to break out just to please his friend Dignan.
See, my friend Dignan didn't realize that this was a voluntary hospital, and he got this whole escape thing worked out.
He really loves the joys of having a team who on their own might feel like misfits, but when they're together, they're not misfits, they're the bomb, and everybody who makes fun of them, like the bullying older brother, is actually the misfit. And I think he turns the world upside down in that way in his movies, and I love him for that.
It's about the same thing that all of his movies are about. It's about broken people trying to heal themselves through absurd means. It's about the impossibility of controlling the world around you, which is, I think, ultimately Anderson's single narrative thread that runs through his entire filmography, that runs through his entire life. He's so obsessed with control as a filmmaker, but only makes movies about people who are out of control.
Happy Gilmore may have been one of the movies I watched the most when I was a kid. I didn't like Adam Sandler in SNL. I didn't really follow Adam Sandler into his future movies, but man, Happy Gilmore I just loved.
Well, even the people who don't like Adam Sandler often say, well, those first two movies, Happy Gilmore and Billy Madison, those are funny.
Billy Madison is where he kind of starts to figure out who he is as a film star versus an SNL star. Even though he's got like this sweet little boy charm, he doesn't have a heart of gold, right? He's still doing stuff that's very selfish, and it's kind of hard to grasp onto Billy Madison, which is why I don't think people love it quite as much as they love Happy Gilmore. Because Happy Gilmore, he starts out, again, as this man-child, but you watch him grow, and he becomes a better person than he was.
The part that really killed me as a kid was the Bob Barker cameo. It was originally supposed to be Ed McMahon, but apparently he would not make fun of himself on film. Bob Barker really jumped at the chance, but his only caveat was he really had to be in the fight scene, and he actually asked them to expand the fight scene. And interestingly enough, Judd Apatow did some uncredited rewrites on that cameo just to try to beef it up and make it a little funnier.
All right, let's go. Oh! You like that, old man? You want a piece of me? I don't want a piece of you. I want the whole thing. Oh!
Bob Barker, unbeknownst to all of us, had actually studied martial arts with Chuck Norris and Chuck Norris's brother. So he was really prepared for this fight. And in fact, this is why he took the role, that he could perform his own stunts and win the fight.
It's one of those movies that is just so perfectly able to set up those moments and let them live in your head rent-free forever and years going down the line. And that is the one that will never, ever get out of my mind.
Horror was sort of on the rocks by the mid-90s. You saw a few horror movies kind of hitting the art house, like Candyman, and then a lot of video store junk like Leprechaun, but nothing really being a line drive for audiences. But two movies brought horror back to high school in 1996 and signaled a wave of teen horror to come.
Scream just pops in the first 10 minutes with that opening set piece with Drew Barrymore, which first sets up the kind of movie it's going to be, this winking postmodern approach to the genre, a horror movie that knows what horror movies are.
You never told me your name.
Why do you want to know my name?
I want to know who I'm looking at.
What did you say?
That opening Drew Barrymore scene, the way it goes from like really, really funny to, oh my God, I need to get the hell out of here. Like the writing in that screenplay is just phenomenal in terms of taking these corny tropes that we would mock from horror movies, mocking them, but then doubling down on them and re-terrorizing us with those same tropes that we totally thought we conquered.
It's really just kind of a tribute to, somebody's love of horror films. And it also, of course, as you know, takes into account the audience that talks about these films and watches them at home with friends and everything else. So it's that kind of weird combination of a scary movie, but also kids talking about scary movies in the scary movie. It's a lot of fun.
It's a ballsy decision to say you're going to put one of the most popular actresses of the time on your poster, on all your marketing materials, and then you're just going to kill her off at the beginning. But it also sets the tone that nobody is safe. You know within the first 10, 15 minutes of the film that anybody could go at any second.
Everybody talks about how Scream resurrected the slasher movie, which it did. But what it really did was resurrect the whodunit. The point of this movie is that no one knows who the killer is. And it doesn't matter that you know you're in a slasher movie if you don't know who the slasher is, because you still get killed. We're not watching Michael Myers, we're not watching Jason Voorhees, we're not watching Freddy Krueger pick and choose and stalk. We're watching the victims exclusively.
It feels like something that was almost not made for girls, but it included women. It included a female audience to enjoy as well. And perhaps it's Neve Campbell, perhaps it's Drew Barrymore, perhaps it's Courtney Cox. But just in that sense, I think Scream becomes quite a revelation in the genre. Add on top of that it's making fun of all of the tropes, but it's also being a very genuine and legitimate entry into the genre as well.
The Craft, a movie that birthed a generation of millennial goths, this one included. This was a film that really galvanized young teenage misfits to find a sense of power in friendship. That's fundamentally what this film is about.
When I saw Rachel True walking down the hallway, suddenly confident after doing a spell, I wanted to be her. Her suspenders with her mini plaid skirt just made me excited that I could have that kind of edge.
It meant a lot as a Black horror fan to see her in there and to see the film not shy away from the racial connotations of being one of the few Black people in your community or in your school. Not a lot of teen films at the time were dealing with racialized narratives.
You can't watch The Craft and not realize Fairuza Balk is a star. She is power in this movie. She drives the tension of taking it too far, but too far for a reason.
There aren't really a lot of effects in the movie. There's not a lot of scary monsters popping out, so she really brings all the scares. Her behavior and how she acts so unhinged really makes that character terrifying.
You don't even exist to me! You don't even exist. You are nothing.
The cast of women around her, the way they each individually grapple with inferiority and then superiority, that's what makes the movie dynamic, and there's like a healing to it.
While the 90s had kicked off with a lot of Shakespeare adaptations, a lot from Kenneth Branagh, few people wanted to touch Romeo and Juliet. A lot of people considered that Zeffirelli version from the 60s so iconic that nobody could do anything different. And then Baz Luhrmann came along and did something completely different.
This comes at a time of a glut of fairly earnest Shakespearean movies. You get Kenneth Branagh's, I think, 4.5-hour unabridged Hamlet, faithful to the letter, leaving absolutely nothing out. And then into this comes Baz Luhrmann with his longtime collaborator and wife, Catherine Martin. What's interesting about his Romeo and Juliet is that Baz Luhrmann doesn't change the language to make this Shakespeare accessible, but he changes absolutely everything else.
Turn thee, Benvolio, and look upon thy death.
I do but keep the peace. Put up thy sword, or manage to depart these men with me.
This is a film that understood the visual culture of the MTV generation. It would have a huge influence on music, on fashion, on makeup, on almost everything. It is one of the iconic films of the 1990s.
Amidst all the chaos and combat and gunplay, there are moments of quietude. There's that beautiful scene around the aquarium where it's just the two of them seeing each other, and there's no dialogue. And Luhrmann just lets that play out, and we as the audience understand what's happening, and that is to the credit of those two young actors who were perfectly matched. It's about capturing the feel of that original play, but then adapting it to a younger audience who want to feel that energy and that fire and the swooning and the angst and all of that, you know, wrapped up in this package that makes it look more like an action film than a quaint story of two houses running at each other's throats. And only Baz, who loves breaking rules and loves smashing different elements together, could bring this to us.
If there are only 3 or so films that you could pick to define 1990s filmmaking, I think one of them has to be Trainspotting. And it's a really interesting example because it's not one from Hollywood.
The thing I remember the most about Trainspotting is energy. It literally hits the ground running and never stops. And even in its quieter moments and its more horrific moments, it's still alive. Danny Boyle had made Shallow Grave a couple of years earlier and established this really brawny, visceral, independent vision of cinema. And with Trainspotting, he throws you into the middle of this incredibly busy novel. You've got this incredibly charismatic, unreliable, but incredibly charismatic narrator, played by Ewan McGregor, who will do anything, be anyone, from moment to moment in order to get his next fix. And his attempts to quit heroin and break this cycle, this whirlpool that's pulling him down with his friends into misery and despair and death. That's the closest the movie comes to optimism.
It is meant to be a subjective drug movie. You are meant to feel that euphoria of taking a drug throughout, which is pretty unusual. It's something that really humanizes the characters, but it also is something that really snaps a cinema audience into their seats, into the movie. One of the interesting castings in the film is Ewan Bremner, somebody with an incredibly thick accent.
I just put down to Royal Edinburgh College to help get the job. There's too much discrimination in this town, man, because they're both schools, right? And we're all in this together.
By allowing him to be authentic and speak as himself in character, that allowed a whole new type of actor to emerge.
These are young, vibrant individuals in really bad situations that they have both put themselves in and that have been kind of thrust upon them. You know, post-Thatcher Britain, not a great place to be. But it's also a movie that isn't about drugs at all. It's about being young. And it's about making terrible choices and trying to recover from those choices.
They worked very closely with this group called the Carlton Athletic Recovery Group. They are recovering heroin addicts. They help them both with the technical stuff, kind of showing what to do, and consulted on the movie. And in fact, they were kind of ahead of their time enough to also give them a cut of the profits of the film. They knew that, you know, just profiting off the story of addiction would kind of make them feel bad, so they wanted to give back to the community. In 1996, it was still pretty unusual to see queer lives in film and television. The Watermelon Woman is notable in film history because it is the first film about black lesbians by a black lesbian director.
Cheryl Dunye created a film that's about being seen and seeing yourself. She wanted to see relationships the way she saw them and she experienced them. She also wanted to discover herself as a black woman in the film industry.
Cheryl Dunye's character is a struggling filmmaker named Cheryl. We see her sit down in front of the camera and voice her concerns about what's this movie going to be about? It's really cool meta filmmaking going on here.
Hi, I'm Cheryl and I'm a filmmaker. Nah, I'm not really a filmmaker, but I have a videotaping business with my friend Tamara and I work at a video store, so I'm working on being a filmmaker.
This documentary narrative hybrid has since been coined Dunye Mentories.
She is documenting her experience of exploring the Black queer experience while playing a character who's exploring the Black queer experience. She wants to know the history of Black cinema and the history of queer cinema, and she wants to document that for herself.
I think a lot of what makes The Watermelon Woman really revolutionary and so great is how it refashions the archive. This is a film that's looking at how the archive has failed minorities, how it's failed historians who are looking for anything else other than a white bread history.
There are times when you don't see yourself or you don't have a seat at the table. Sometimes you just have to make it and do it without any assistance. And that's what Cheryl Dunye did with The Watermelon Woman. She had a queer crew, a queer cast, and she was figuring it out along the way. I think that's just really incredible.
In and around 1996, you see a lot of queer stories that are trying to process the AIDS crisis. And The Birdcage is really delightful in that it's kind of a break from those narratives that were becoming so overwhelming emotionally at the time.
It was really the first movie with openly gay characters to reach #1 at the box office that didn't feature, you know, misery and sadness. And it was there for 4 weeks. I think it really signaled to a lot of people that the general opinions on gay life in America were changing.
It's a remake of a very good film, La Cage aux Folles. It's Americanized and all of these things that we hate. But this movie is the epitome of joy. Every single actor in this movie is having the time of their life. The dynamic between Nathan Lane and Robin Williams is so believable and so loving and gentle but caustic. It feels like relationships I've been in.
The movie is like a fun late bloom of Nichols and May, right? Like Mike Nichols has now had this amazing EGOT career, whatever moment he is here in this EGOT. And Elaine May does the adaptation and her script is so whip smart. This is another really fun, deeply sarcastic, deeply witty script.
It's said that Mike Nichols' mantra on The Birdcage was never underestimate the audience. And he always points out that anyone who got hung up on stereotypes in the film just need to remember that this is not a film about gays, it's a film about drag divas and theater people.
If there was anyone on top of the world in 1996, it was Tom Cruise, mostly because he had made both Mission Impossible and Jerry Maguire, and both were huge hits at the box office.
There were a lot of movies adapted from television series in the 90s. It was sort of a thing, and people realized that the audience for shows that aired in the 50s and 60s were suddenly interested in buying movie tickets, or the kids that grew up watching them on cable in syndication were suddenly interested in seeing modern versions of it. Mission Impossible is the only one that spawned a 25-year franchise that gets bigger and louder and more expensive with every iteration.
This was like old school filmmaking in service of a brand new modern spy franchise. And it was the original recipe that got it right before it blew open and became like a mega blockbuster thing. Brian De Palma is giving you a real deal film noir here.
The big touch De Palma added to Mission Impossible and his probably permanent mark on the franchise is the CIA heist sequence. He said he was so tired of loud explosions in action movies, he wanted to challenge the team to create a nearly silent sequence in the film. So you have this almost 20-minute sequence, which is all about carefulness, quietness, and just being still and getting something done.
The first film really sets so much of the groundwork for the rest of the franchise, but in some ways it's so different from the rest of the franchise. They shot a lot of it in Prague, which is just such an amazing setting. Like, you get a bit of this sort of Rashomon kind of style storytelling where you're seeing all these different perspectives from the same incident, and the way the story unfolds and all the double crosses, it's amazing.
When I think of the influence of Mission Impossible, it's very, very vast for a film that was based off of a 60s television show that I'm sure nobody thought would ever work, but never count out Tom Cruise, I guess.
I can't believe Mission Impossible and Jerry Maguire are the same year. This is the era when Tom Cruise was perfect. He was so handsome in Mission Impossible with the glasses when he puts them on, and that haircut, and that suave, and that like need to solve this crime, and he's just so cool. And then in Jerry Maguire, it's the tale of humbling an arrogant man. Yes, it's romantic, and it explores sports politics in a really fun way, and that's a fresh movie.
One of the most quotable movies of all time.
I mean, you're yelling,
let's do the hits.
Show me the money.
Show me the money. Justin, you had me at hello.
Okay, so 2 quotes out of Jerry Maguire.
There's got to be a third. You complete me, that's Jerry Maguire.
Say what you will about Tom Cruise, and we can all say a lot of things, but I think he gives a really generous performance in Jerry Maguire. I think he's incredibly generous to Renee Zellweger. I think he lets Cuba Gooding shine. It's a movie that lets a single mother not just want to have a bigger life, but actually get one. So I think in a way it was a little bit ahead of its time.
I like to think that there is an alternate universe where if there was a fork in the road for Tom Cruise from between Mission Impossible and Jerry Maguire, what it would be like if he chose Jerry Maguire. What Tom Cruise would we have today? And I like that Tom Cruise. I miss 1996's Tom Cruise.